Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. Today, we'll through our Latina Live Talks. Today, we're going over career growth and wealth building as a first-gen professional. Today, we have the incredible Jolisa Gonzalez. Take it away.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for having me, Rafael. It's an honor to be on here another week. I think that the last conversation we had was amazing, and I'm excited to go a little bit more into, your side of things and hearing your thoughts about money in our culture.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, all of you who are joining us today. Today, we're just going to have a wonderful follow-up of our previous talk. But this time, we're going to do a little bit of role reversal. Instead of me interviewing Jolisa, Jolisa is going to be interviewing me. So
All right, you ready?
I'm ready. Shoot away.
So last time we were focusing a lot about, money mindset and how much of a role that could play in our life, in our community, and just a lot of the things in our day to day. So Rafael, one question that I had for you is growing up, were there any messages that you heard most often in your family or your community around money?
Yeah, absolutely. I always have a wonderful story of sharing when I was about 4 years old and I was fundraising for our soccer uniforms. Um, I came back to our coach 2 days later and I brought an envelope of $4,000. And our coach fell off of his seat and he said, "Oh my gosh, how did you raise $4,000 at 4 years old?" And I said, "Well, I just went to the really rich houses where during trick or treat they give you a large candy." So it was a no brainer for me when it came to fun and when it came to raising funds. And our coach says, "Oh my gosh, I think you have a knack for fundraising." And behold, that is now one of my careers. Fast forward today. So for me personally, growing up, in a Latino family household, money fluctuated, right? There was always highs and lows. And uh, with that, how can I put it? There was highs and lows. And so with that, that kind of created, I always said in our previous talk that there's always a saver and a spender. And so for me, being great at sales, I became kind of the spender in my current relationship. So that was a little bit. I love spending. My wife always says, you always spend like there's always going to be money. I've been shifting and learning a lot because she's a saver, and that's something that I love about her. And so shifting into saving, right? For me, I always felt like it was going to work out. Tomorrow was going to work out. Very bad habit. Don't do that. And so, yeah, that's a little bit about money. Things that I got from my mom and dad was my mom was the saver in the family, very smart with saving. My dad, I think I picked those traits. He was a spender. So
I love the story that you brought up about when you were 4 years old and the fundraiser. Honestly, that's genius. And now that I have any cousins that have to do fundraising, I'm going to send them all to the neighborhoods that are giving out the big candy bars because it makes sense to go to those places and target it. What type of lesson do you think you learned from that specific situation itself?
yeah, so for me, just a little bit of background of what I just explained is I was at a very young age, I was a newspaper boy. So I was delivering newspapers. I always, money came in my hands and left as quickly as it came. So I was a newspaper boy. I was always doing something. I consider myself a very young, small entrepreneur as a Latino. So I was always doing something. So whether it's fixing neighbors' bicycles, when the chain would fall off, I would have a wrench and that it would charge $1. I remember going to school. And having these baseball card scratch offs and buying a box for $20 and selling everybody these scratch offs as a kid. And if you would win, you'd get a big giant Snickers bar. And so fast forward, I just was always had that entrepreneurship spirit of kind of, and I got that from my dad, right? Build something, have multiple revenue streams, go out there and work really hard. I think all of us as Latinos, we get that hard work ethic of working twice as much as anybody else.
I love that. I think that a lot of the time with Latinos, you often see that entrepreneurial spirit and bringing up stories from the past. I remember being in the second grade and it was recess time, and a few of us decided to set up a store with our desks. So we had those desks that like you open up, and then we started gathering like our school supplies, notebooks, this and the other, and we either like were like trading it and bartering it with each other, or giving that money. And then, you know, growing up, there used to be that fidget spinners craze. I also was like selling fidget spinners outside of my work window at some point. But it's just funny how those lessons can carry on, you know, from generation to generation, and this could be in our bloodline. And I think it's good that having that creativity, because you never know what's around the corner, and being able to be creative and come up with different ideas to come up with money and that type of thing could be so beneficial. So speaking of never knowing what's around the corner, have you ever had any money wake up calls that changed the way you thought about earning or spending?
Absolutely. I mean, I have to comment on your story. I love your tiendita story as a kid. It brings me flashback. Are you sure we didn't go to the same elementary school? Just bringing in your backpack, whether stickers, trading, bartering. I think as Latinos and Latinas, we get very creative, right? For me, I just grew up with a lot of friends. That sold food. A great example, a great friend of mine went door to door, knocking and selling pre-orders of tamales. That's a great example. And I remember one time sitting down and saying, "Hey, how many pre-orders of tamales have you done?" I was like, "Oh, I already sold $600 worth of pre-orders." And I was like, "Oh my gosh!" So I was always around kids that were just entrepreneurs. You know, we talk about adults being entrepreneurs. I guess we were the trendsetters back then, it sounds like though we didn't go to the same elementary school, we were doing a lot of the same bartering and just spending. You know, in terms of money wake up calls, absolutely. I think one of the things as I got older and you start talking about your 401k, you start talking about life insurance, you find that those things are very important in terms of tools and building wealth. And so that's one of the wonderful things that now, fast forward, my wife and I have those conversations, right? Having life insurance policies, different multiple life insurance policies for different case needs of the different stages and phases that you are in your life and in your career.
So I see that you mentioned up having those conversations with your significant other. Is this like conversations that were brought up mutually, or more so by you or your significant other? I
Yeah,
think
absolutely. So those wake up calls, I'd say were those wake up calls were through my significant other. I think, in terms of money wake up calls, being with college, I think for me, when I went to UCLA, it was managing student loans, right? I think that was a wake up call for me. In terms of getting a full scholarship, I also leaned on pulling out some loans, and those were huge wake up calls for me, right? Money that you borrow now, you eventually have to pay it with interest later, and so I learned a valuable lesson. I think in our earlier talk of kicking the can down the road, right? Don't do that. What at the time for that particular wake up call, I borrowed $12,000 and had to pay close to $30,000 back. So that for me, that was an absolute wake up call where I just had to be disciplined and say, "Hey, you got to be responsible and take care of this." So I love using that example especially for young Latinos that are going off to college, right? Be responsible, understand the importance of money, finance, borrowing, and debt and interest, right? Going back to the conversation that you and I were talking about earlier, APR, right? Understanding what an APR, the difference between national banks, your local community foundations, how they might have a different APR. That is super important for all of us to pay attention to.
it is very important, especially, you know, bringing up those loans, specifically college loans. So many people take out these humongous loans that, if you think about it, if the same kid were to try to go to the bank and take out this loan personally, they would have a little bit, you know, more struggle with getting that because they don't have the financials to cover it. Whereas with school, they take out these big loans, they're not really educated. And then, you know, there's different types where you could it starts acquiring interest now versus later. And those things are very important to know because, like you said, like if you kick things down the can, you could be spending a lot more money than you want to at the end of the day. Would you say that, there was a moment where your money mindset, not money itself, made the biggest difference in a decision for you?
Yeah, I think, as you become responsible, understand the power and influence of money. Money for me, I think, as I was growing up, it allows you to, right? It's the currency, how you move. You're able to buy something, and so college, as many of us as Latinos, we're kind of are leaving our household for the first time, right? We're learning how to get our first credit card if you haven't gotten a credit card. So for me, the first credit card that I ever got was a university credit card, right? Because as you walk through the student union hall, you have tons of individuals giving you your UCLA credit cards. Like, hey, are you a student? Do you want a credit card? You should get a credit card. And so that's kind of where I learned, and kind of through trial and error. And then one of the things that I did by hanging out with Latinos that were studying accounting and finance, and hanging out with them, learning, attending seminars where you learn about how to manage a budget, profit and loss, and you kind of do a deep dive, and you pick up things along the way of something you want to learn. So for me, it's been a learning curve, of dealing with money and responsibility, if that makes sense.
That makes a lot of sense. And it sounds like the community that you had in college and maybe high school really shaped, your mindset and your knowledge when it comes to money. And I think that unfortunately, a lot of people don't have that in our community. You grow up, your parents, they don't know as much as they should or want to. And then as you go through life, and if you're continuing to be in the same circles, you're kind of stuck with the amount of knowledge you have. So it's so important to, putting yourself out there and putting yourself into rooms that you feel uncomfortable in, and rooms that you're not the smartest in the room, because that's how you could grow, and that's how you could get that information. And it's normal that, growing up, you may not have had that knowledge, but realizing that and then getting exposed to that area, I think is so, so important.
Absolutely. I always hear the story of, I've had good dear friends of mine talk about how their families, their moms and parents would put the money under the mattress. For me, growing up, I remember my abuelita putting money in un garrafón de agua, one of those kind of circular garrafones. And, whenever she needed to pull out money, it was a garrafón where she had a little rolled up cash stored there. And so it's wonderful hearing these traditions. I hope you're not doing that now, that you are storing it in the bank or in the stock market.
Right, exactly. And it's funny that you bring up that story, because my mom just told me the other day that her savings account, she used to have a red blazer, and then inside her jacket that she used to keep all of her money. And one time she moved across the country and she put like $4,000 in her pocket, and she was like, yeah, thankfully it was still there. I'm like, yeah, thankfully it was still there after you moved. Oh my goodness. But hopefully, these generational things are starting to shift the more we become educated, because I know that like a lot of the reason why people would stuff money in their coats or their mattresses or whatever is because there was a big mistrust in the banks because what had happened a while ago. So it's good to be continuing these conversations and learning, what the different people are doing.
Absolutely, and I think you just said something really important, which is a lot of our families come from other countries, right? So when you look at those particular banking systems, imagine if you came from a country that suddenly they locked and you didn't have access. I remember hearing these stories to kind of understand a little bit why in the Latino culture there's this idea. To keep the money, my dad always had an expression. I love the money in my bank account, and so what he meant was, when it came to investments and opportunities, a lot of risk, and so for Latinos that come out of banks in other countries that maybe they closed for a week and there was a lot of turmoil, change of government that is not so smooth or transitional, where there's that kind of stability in the banking system outside of the U.S. I could see why those behaviors, why our parents and grandparents had those particular behaviors, where we now hear those stories of like, oh, el abuelito guardaba todo el dinero under the mattress.
Right, exactly. And I think it's important to bring these stories to light and understand why people make the decisions they do. Because if you don't understand why they act that way, then when you're trying to educate them and help them change their ways, if that's for the better, it's going to be hard to do that if you don't know what the deep rooted cause is for that. So, just making all these conversations and known is really important. So I think that a lot of people, especially in our community, tie their self-worth to money. Do you think you've ever struggled with that? And how do you separate the two?
Oh, that's a really good question. Um, Yeah, I think, money is, like I said, it's a currency. If you want, you can, when we go a step further, you talk about needs and wants, right? I want a pair of shoes. Do I really need them when you already have 10 pairs, right? So for me, when it came to money, I was, you know, I, I have kind of that entrepreneurship business mindset. So let me explain a little bit further. When I was in college, I was the individual that would buy a suit, that was, very considerable. I mean, I'll $7,000 to $8,000 suit. I would buy it at wholesale, anything between 900 to $1,200. And so, but the great thing about uh, buying that particular suit, for me particularly, it was my mentors. Is when you have a suit that speaks of confidence. Fast forward, I got myself into a habit where now I accumulated over 45 suits, and so you could imagine the investments that and the upkeep, right? The dry cleaning, that everything that goes behind maintaining those particular suits. And I think as I got older, whatever suit and whatever is comfortable to you is the way to go. But I had to go through that learning process, right? So for me, I looked at my mentors of what they were wearing, the brands that they were wearing, Keaton, Brioni, Stefano Ricci, particular suits that CEOs and mentors of mine that work for the Fortune 500 would wear it. And I would always aspire to something like that. And luckily, I had a friend of mine who was the only Italian suit dealer in the United States. And it's through that relationship that I was able to befriend somebody and have access to suits like that. So I went through overspending and putting on credit cards, early in my career, to have this corporate look. Now I wear suits because I truly and genuinely enjoy them. It's something I like to consider. My wife says, I've never met anybody that wears so many suits as you do. But, that's also could be applied to anything else, right? The of wanting not only suits, wanting the best of something that can get you in a very quick pickle, right? When it comes to shoes, I used to have a great dear friend of mine who had, I think over 200 pair of Jimmy Choos. She was so wanted Jimmy Choos, and I was like, oh my gosh, you have over like an incredible amount. If you sold your Jimmy Choos on eBay, you'd have an incredible money in your bank account. But for her, her identity was, oh my gosh, I need to get the latest and the greatest pair. But that also creates a bad habit, right? A bad behavior of wanting and being caught in that consumption cycle, if that makes sense. And so
Mhm.
you've got to be able to acknowledge, right, that within yourself, and of what is too much and what is a need and what is a want. That's something, a great skill set that I learned early on, that I was able to work on and address for myself personally, if that makes sense. So
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think you brought up two different sides of the coin of, spending not excessively, but investing in things. So you invested in suits, which kind of helped your career by, what you wore, who you're able to get in contact with. I think that something we can struggle with is that a lot of people don't take us seriously if we don't look or dress the part. So we're kind of in the pickle of, yeah, we don't want to spend too much money and be putting things in credit cards, but then at the same time, it's like we feel that we're kind of forced to, because if we're not up to par with everyone else, then they're not going to take us seriously. So I think it definitely is that balancing act. Now, buying every single newest Jimmy Choos for the, whatever, I don't know if that's the best investment, but I could see how it can be hard trying to know when you should be investing more so in yourself and your appearance, as it will like help elevate your career, as opposed to just doing it as it's tied to your self-worth and your identity.
Absolutely, and as I gotten older, I always say that buy something that you love that brings you joy. I was talking to a group of Latinas, and I always talk about materialistic things that bring you those same things that bring you temporary joy can bring you pain. A great example I like talking about is, let's say for example, Yolisa, you bought that $3,000, $5,000 bag that you've always wanted, right? And you go out to a networking conference night and you set your bag down in a sofa. And hypothetically, let's say somebody's smoking or somebody has a pen and accidentally raya or burns your purse. Unbeknownst to you, you wake up the next morning, you're just kind of checking your bag that you're so proud that you are so self-identified with, and then you see a cigarette burn or a pen mark, and that same thing that caused you joy now suddenly reminds you of, oh my gosh, ay Dios mío, ¿qué pasó? Who did this, right? So I
Yeah.
always love sharing that story because I'm careful with materialistic things. They can bring a lot of joy, but they can also bring a lot of pain, right? So, and then keeping up with the Joneses, right? I think as Latinos, stepping into new roles where we are making now more money, I think is as more money comes, you make more, you spend more, right? So it should be inverted. You make more, you invest more, right? I think that's why we're having these sessions here and having these candid conversations where it's not about making more, spending more. It's about making more and investing more.
Exactly. Because I think a lot of people end up in that wheel of they make more money, but then they find more things to buy to fill it. So then they're back at square one and going back up and down. And investing is a way to grow that money outside of your 9 to 5 or your business venture, et cetera, et cetera. So speaking of, making more, spending more, do you think that Latinos talk openly enough about money? And if not, what do you think holds us back?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I like, I'm a unique kind of exception. I think that great organizations are doing great to engage our community to talk about more money. Budget your checkbook, right? I think there's a lot of seminars. I think there has to be a willingness from our community wanting to bridge the gap of being out there and saying yes to these seminars, to these opportunities to learn, to engage in conversation. I think that's the first step. For me, I like to say I'm an anomaly. So all my circle of friends, I'm always pushing. I'm the little kid that's always, hey, you should start your own business. Have you thought of investing in this? Have you thought about that? So for me, is I have a group of a mentor of mine. Early in his career in the 80s, Sayu Lancy at the time bought an incredible house in what's called the Malibu Colony. While that's known as Billionaires Row. And at the time, he bought the house I think for close to $1 million in the 80s. That was a lot of money. But what he did is he went with 2 other doctors and another friend of his. He was a doctor, became the head of the Martin Luther King Hospital. And I said, Sai, why did you buy in the old Malibu colony? I said, Rafael, I knew that California was not going to allow any more home constructions in Malibu. And so he bought house number 12. And I remember him listing it for sale for $39 million and sold for $32 million. And that just ability to spot opportunity was just something that's fascinating for me, being around individuals, that the way they move and they think about money and investments, right? For him, he saw it back then in the 80s as an incredible opportunity. California won't allow more home construction in Billionaires Row, or the old colony as it was called. And so he did a smart investment, and throughout the years he gradually bought his partners out, and behold, he had an incredible, beautiful, almost $40 million value home in Malibu. And so those are some great stories and great examples of find and júntate con, globos or people or sponsors or mentors that are doing some incredible work. And so for me, is when I was very young in college at UCLA, I would meet maybe a speaker, and I would go, hey, I would love to learn about more about you and how you ended up where you got to. And so for me, I approach everything with curiosity and wanting to learn and sponge. And I've had an interesting trajectory in life.
That's great. And I love how it goes back to the community aspect and, being educated by who you surround yourself with. Growing up, one of my first jobs, I used to work for the Cleveland Housing Court for the city of Cleveland. And, I work with judges and magistrates. And I thought like, wow, like that's it. Like this is it. This is wealth. This is amazing. And then I stepped into the financial services industry and I was like, oh, I'm like, there's a lot more out there than I even know. And just being able to see what people have done, what they're doing. And it just gives you such a bigger perspective on things because you don't know what you don't know. So if I would have stayed working for the city of Cleveland all my life, I probably would have never got the exposure that I did. And I probably would have never began to start thinking and dreaming bigger because I didn't know what was possible. And I think many of us end up like that. They're like, well, I can't do this. I can't do that. I don't know anyone that does this. I don't know what they're doing. Everybody's telling me I can't do it. But it goes back to your circle, who you're surrounding yourself with. And if you can't find them locally, LinkedIn is a great place to find all your crazy friends with the crazy ideas. That's where I've found a lot of my good friends, my crazy dreamers, business people, everything like that. Because it can be hard when you're the only one in the friend group with the ideas and the dreams and constantly just being shut down because nobody really understands or sees it.
Absolutely. I love what we're just talking about right now. We're talking about different groups, right? You're talking about your social group circles and your career circles, right? So I always tell friends, I have people that I just love spending Sunday and barbecuing and grilling, right? So I have my friends that I love that travel. I have a group of friends that are very entrepreneurship. I actually put together my own social group of friends that are investors. So I grabbed 5 of my dear friends that I knew were great at investing, and we pulled each other. Just to kind of give you an idea, when I grabbed a particular portfolio that I was managing by myself, and I gave it for that particular portfolio to be managed, and when they did, immediately they looked at the portfolio and the analysis. They kind of said, well, we cannot absolutely replicate what you have. Your margins of your investments of what you have done are just anomalies. And that's a great example of just putting together a group and saying, hey, you work in this industry, let's come together. It's going back to that story I shared earlier of my fantastic mentor who invested in the Malibu colony. He put together that particular group of friends to invest in that property. So for me, I looked at it from a lens of, hey, deja poner un grupo de amigos alrededor para invertir, para saber cómo hacer más dinero, right? How to be able to make more money and triplicar or quadruple the money that you already have when it comes to investment. So.
Yeah, and I think that you are very intentional about creating those communities and finding those communities. Unfortunately, I think that people know they want the community, they want these people, but they're just hoping that they'll just fall out of the skies and like it'll disappear. But you got to put in some work. You have to like actually put yourself out there, put yourself in scenarios, randomly message people on LinkedIn. I mean, LinkedIn's a great tool. Like I said, like you do special searches for special industries, but you have to be intentional with your time, the groups you're creating. What do you really value? What are you trying to learn more? And then taking that and finding those people.
Oh, absolutely. I always say that, don't leave anything to chance. I remember, growing up in a Catholic home. I grew up and saw my tias always, when they were went on a date and they were hoping that, that date that they went out, that he would ask for a follow-up date. And they were prendían la veladora, right? And so I grew up around that culture of ojalá, praying and ojalá suceda. And I think you just mentioned something. You have to be intentional. You have to go out there and get out of your comfort zone. And for me, I fluctuate from being amazing as it is. I fluctuate between being quiet to very social, right? So being an introvert, extrovert. So I tell this to people, and they're like, "Oh my gosh, you are absolutely not an introvert," but I am. There's individuals like us that are out in the community. Sometimes we have social communication overload, right? So there will be moments where I'd be really quiet, very observative, but I had to get out of, I had to get out of my comfort zone of going out there. Hola, ¿qué tal? ¿Cómo estás? Mi nombre es Rafael Magaña. And that's how I started. I got out there. ¿Qué lo que haces? I want to learn everything about everything and anything about you. I think going back to that child curiosity and sponging and wanting to get to know people.
I love that. I'm so happy to find another extroverted introvert because I also am one of those. And everybody's like, no, you're not. I'm like, trust me. After a few days at a conference, like I'm dead. I can't open my mouth. Like I can't think. Like it doesn't work. Like that's how I know I'm still like technically an introvert because my body just doesn't like me when I do it. But it's good to know that for you introverts out there that it's possible for you to, be a little less introverted at sometimes if you put in the reps. I've come a long way. I used to be the kid that just they would talk to me and I just wouldn't speak. And now I'm doing this and, doing all the things. So just putting yourself out there is just so important. I know that we're getting close on time. So to wrap things up, if you had one I can't even speak today. If you could pass one money lesson down to the next generation of Latino professionals, what would it be?
Start with realizing whether you're a spender or you're a saver. Look at your inflows and outflows, revenue. I think that's important. Put together a worksheet of what is coming into your bank account and what is leaving. I think that is a very important lesson for you to know. And I think we talked about it earlier in our previous talk is, are you a spender or are you a saver? And why is that important? Imagine, Yolisa, if two spenders get together and have a relationship, both are going to be spending their bank accounts to ground zero. And so I think it's important for you to recognize. I learned this much later in life. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm a spender and my partner is a saver. And so it's important for you to learn that. And then the following kind of sub-step of that is absolutely put together a worksheet that you can look at all of your balance of what's coming in your bank and leaving your bank account.
Yeah, I think that's an amazing step to start. Are you a spender? Are you a saver? It's a little simple step for you to start on your money journey and figure out the next steps and what you could do.
Wonderful. Well, this was such a great talk. Thank you so much, Yolisa, for joining us. Thank all of you for joining us today and having this talk. We'll see you next time.
Bye. Thank you.